Thanks for joining us, Adam. Over to you today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thanks for having me. I'd like to thank yourself and Myosh for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And thank you for the intro. I was going to do a little one myself, but basically you stole all my thunder. So I'll just touch on my background. So I've worked in underground mining basically for the last 15 years. I started off in operational roles, just in the day-to-day workings underground. And after about 5 years, I moved into safety and training roles, which then led into management roles. And more recently, moved from mining, and I worked on a tunnel infrastructure project here in Sydney, which was a pretty big project, thousands of people on the site each day. And it was good to see something similar, although a little bit different, and see how that related to mining. So as you can see, the title here is called the Intangibles, and it's probably where my focus lies. I like to look at the things that we can't or we don't measure well, or can't be measured that easily. So as Sarah mentioned, I spoke at the MindSafe conference the other week. This talk covers some of the same areas, although it's a little bit different. And after preparing for the last couple of weeks about this talk, I decided to do a last-minute change at about 11 o'clock last night. So hopefully it works through okay. And there are some people here that can do a little survey that will pop up shortly, because I sort of need their answers to touch on as I go through the talk. So we'll get started on that. There's a QR code. If you scan that QR code, the survey will pop up. If you're on your phone, you might be able to just type in the link there, and hopefully there's some people on that can complete it, and I'll get some answers as we go. So I'll leave that in your capable hands and see where we get to, and hopefully it works. I won't wait too long before I kick off, but we'll see if they're coming through. Oh, first one's there, so thank you for the first person who completed that. Sarah said there wasn't a massive turnout, so it's probably good. I thought if I was lucky to get a big crowd, it might crash SurveyMonkey by getting too many people doing it at once. Now, there's a few coming through now, so I'll kick it off. So these two questions here are probably two that I focus on the most, and have probably been coming back, and I've continually been re-looking at them and seeing where I come from, and basically what is safety, and how do we look at it, and what do we do, what are the results we expect, how do we measure it, all those sort of things. And I think our language around that, for instance, we very often say safety first. So looking at it from a equation perspective, to me that we're looking at safety as though it is something separate to the task itself, and therefore you have to do the safety thing with the task to get the safe outcome. And the more research I've done and learning that I've done, it's probably taking me further away from that. And I personally see safety as an outcome, and it's a result of getting other things right. And so the beliefs we have about safety play sort of hand in hand with that. So when we look at it, as I said, we say safety first a lot of the time. We have safety culture, we have safety leadership. I think we probably need to get away from giving them those titles and just have it as culture and leadership, with safety being a fundamental part of it, not a separate part of it. I think that's the first step that we can take to maybe look at getting some better results. So with the beliefs about safety, there's obviously the system side of things, the culture side of things, and then there's a lot of other things that go hand in hand with that, whether we think it's just compliance to a system or a compliance to legislation, whether it's the people not hurting themselves, and is it's safe if we're not having incidents. Does it all play hand in hand? And those beliefs that we have are pretty important. And the first reason why I'll touch on beliefs is that there's two reasons. The first one being the beliefs are sort of the basis for our end results. All our emotions come from our beliefs, and then our actions come from our emotions. And as a result, our actions end up being our results. And that's why what we believe definitely is very important when it comes to safety. In the sense that if something or someone goes against what our beliefs are, then how do we react to that? And that reaction will then lead to what we do and will give us the result. So although they sort of sit deep down and we mightn't go and look at them as often as we should if we ever do, but our beliefs in that sense are pretty important, because our actions then create the environment that everyone works with. So I'd recommend that people and organisations really try and look at that on a deeper level and find out what their actual beliefs about safety are and how they think about and how they look at safety. So the first question that I asked there, which was, what is the purpose of the safety management system? I'll just have a quick look. We've got a few through. Nope, they're not in the order that I did them. Sorry about that. Confused myself. I actually forgot to put that question in. So the purpose of the system, is it to comply with legislation? Is it to keep people safe, or is it both? So I would suggest that most people would say both, but I think that we really need to ask the question, does it actually do what we want it to do? And there's a reason for that, which I'll get to shortly, but whenever we do the things that we do, all those KPIs that we measure, the inspections that we do, I think the first question we need to ask is, are they doing what we actually think they do? And the reason being that we have those beliefs and they're our beliefs, but what do the people who are doing the job, what do they believe? And do their beliefs align with ours? I think most people would agree that if you're out of alignment, then things don't run as smoothly as they would if you were in alignment. Going into this next slide, so this was from a previous survey I did a few years ago in relation to, was with some underground miners. There was about 300 surveys completed. And this was one of the questions in relation to the safety management system. And their bottom answer there, I think, is pretty important. So 20% nearly 21% of the people that were surveyed were unsure if their company even had a safety management system. And I guess the question I ask from that is, if we look at the system as keeping people safe, if 21% of the people who work for the company and supposedly use that system, if they don't even know it exists, can that keep them safe? And I guess that's where we need to get the alignment right and make sure that what we're actually doing aligns with what the people doing the task believe, and is it doing what we want it to do? So the next question, which was, what do we spend more time on, safety or compliance? From the surveys done, we had so 71% said that they rely on systems and compliance is where they spend more time. And sorry, I did tell a porcupine before. That question was there. 86%, the previous question about what is the purpose of the safety management system, 86% said both, and complying with legislation said one. So there was no one who had the standout of keeping the employees safe. So apologise for that, I didn't see it. But moving on to this one, so we spend most of our time on systems and compliance. Well, 70% against 30%, say that time spent there. So what we're spending our time on, are we getting the best bang for our buck, is probably where I'd be looking at that. So with that, looking at high performance teams, are probably jumping out of the safety sphere here. And I like reading about some high performance coaches. There's three in particular. I'll probably talk about two here today. One's name's Owen Eastwood, and the other one's Michael Gervais. And I'll touch on a podcast that they did together, and I'd recommend anyone listening to that to get some different perspectives about performance. And in that, Owen talks about a study that was conducted by the English Institute of Sport, and that paper suggested that 70% of behaviours came from the environment that people were in, not the system. So that was a systems versus environment paper, and it showed up that 70% of those behaviours come from the environment that's created. So I guess that's the point I was trying to make there. We're spending a lot of time on systems and compliance when there's information out there that suggests that spending the time on the environment would probably have a greater benefit for us. And this one here was also from it's in relation to alignment, and from a survey I'd done with a company I did some work with. And as you can see there, with the senior leaders compared to the employees, the answers were very different. So the question I asked there was what makes mining safe? It was a mining company, so specifically related to them. And the senior leaders were with you guys who just answered that, and it's sitting at about 70% there too. They said 70% that the safety management system is what made mining safe, whereas the employees were about 70% saying that the people doing the task were what made mining safe. So being out of alignment, as I mentioned earlier, it makes it a bit hard. So senior leaders are tipping 70% of or the majority of their time into that system to get that system right. Yet the employees are saying that it's them or the culture or or the environment that is giving them the results of making mining safe. So this brings us to the second point about our beliefs. And that question at the bottom there, who's going to change? So it's not behaviours that we need to change, it's the beliefs that need to change. And that's a bit more complicated and not quite as easy as saying, I think you need to do this differently. So this is the pictures in the way there, but so at the bottom with beliefs, if we need any beliefs to change, we have the belief itself, and then the next thing we have to look at is do they have, or does the person have the capacity to change? Do they have the training? Do they have that capability to change? And if they do, great. If they don't, then that's something that can easily be worked on, and we can go around and help them out with that and get them trained up and get that part of it done. But then we have to look at the next step, which is the value. So again, they might have their belief, they have the capability to change, but do they value that change? And is that change going to benefit them? They also need that. And then finally, and the hardest thing to change is if that belief is a part of their identity. I don't think you can see identity there, but that's what it's saying behind the screen. So it's not that easy to change someone's identity. And again, outside of the safety scope, the example it's probably the easiest to give is smoking. So do people have the capacity to stop smoking? Yes, they do. Do they value it? Yep, I imagine most people would say smoking is harmful to me. It could kill me if I don't stop. But the problem they come is they look at it and it's part of their identity is that they're a smoker. So you have to get all those three things lined up and be able to change those things to be able to change that belief. And I think that directly relates to safety and some of the things that we talk about when things go wrong. And just to throw one more spanner in the works, the environment sits under those beliefs. So we can have all those things that people can have the capability to stop smoking, they can see the benefit in it, they can change their identity from being a smoker to a non-smoker. But if the environment they're in, if everyone they work with or wherever it may be, if everyone there smokes, then that also adds another layer of that change, just makes it that little bit more difficult. So it's quite a complex thing, and it's probably goes a little way to explaining why it is so difficult to changing behaviours. So then the next question I chucked out there was, what do you think is more important? Sorry. I'm just going to open it back up again. We've got compliance to safety or creating an environment of trust. And again, 70% said creating the environment of trust, whereas just under 30% said compliance to the safety management system. So again, there's a bit of misalignment with even the people listening here, where we're spending our time on the system, yet we think it's more important to create that trust. So that's, again, I think we've got to go back and really look at what we're doing and why we're doing it and what we want to achieve with that. So what is an environment of trust? Well, the buzzword in safety at the moment is psychological safety. Owen Eastwood, the guy I mentioned a bit before, he called it belonging, and he's written a book called by that title. Again, it's a book I'd recommend everyone read. He's a pretty cool guy, and and got his beliefs from experience and his life growing up. There's also there's a billionaire named Ray Dalio, again, written another book called Principles. It's a pretty intense book. It's about 700 pages long, so there's a bit of information in it, but there's definitely some wisdom, and he calls it meaningful, creating meaningful relationships. So in reality, I don't think it really matters what we call it, but really it's just about caring for the people who work for you. It might seem a bit airy-fairy, but if you care for them and they understand that, then it just creates this extra room where if things do go wrong, you get that little bit of a buffer that you mightn't have to do things perfectly, because there is that level of trust. And Ray Dalio, he calls one of his other principles is radical truth and radical transparency. And his workforce, they're probably, well, I guess blunt is probably the best word to use, but that works for them. And the reason he says that they can do that is because that his employees know that he loves them, and that's the reason behind it. That underneath the bluntness, it's coming from a position of care, not from any position of fear or anything like that. And just that trust that allows the people doing the work not to have fear of making mistakes. They have the confidence to speak up. They know they won't get shot down. They will be listened to, and just having that, as I said, gives that extra buffer. And when the more information you get, the better answers you come up with. So allowing that two-way consultation back and forth, it is pretty important, and consultation is a part of legislation where we're required to consult with the workforce to come up with how we do things. And from experience, I think we possibly pay lip service to that a little bit. Moving on to the next one, what do you think is the highest standard? And well, 100% of us said commitment, not compliance. And that's, again, to me, pretty interesting, because we constantly talk about compliance, and commitment isn't mentioned as often. So yeah, very interesting, that one. And again, this is directly related to consultation, because people won't commit if they don't have the ability to say no to something. So we're essentially telling them in compliance, we're telling them what they need to do. They don't have a choice, they have to do that. And it's the only way to get it done. And I think, personally, I think compliance is a pretty mediocre standard, and it doesn't, again, in relation to the environment, it's not creating an environment of high performance. So with the answers given there, I think it's definitely clear that we need to try and get commitment to what we're doing. And we get commitment to our system through consulting with those workers that are employed to do the job. Just probably going a bit sideways with this, even the language we use around compliance. So it's when I was doing the talk, when I was writing the talk for the MindSafe conference, that was when Ash Barty retired, and our Prime Minister at the time, who just recently lost his job, he tweeted something along the lines of, Ash, your commitment to excellence throughout your career was what got you to the top. And I kind of found it funny at the time because I was writing about commitment. So even the way we use that language shows that commitment sits above compliance. It wasn't, hey, Ash, you complied with excellence to get to the top. It was you committed yourself to that excellence. So our everyday language around that stuff is pretty important, and I think it tells a story in itself. I'll take that to a work example from my role on the tunnel, where one of our biggest hazards there was silicosis. Working in the sandstone had really high levels of silica. So it was a day-to-day battle, and we had mandatory rules in place about wearing masks. And obviously wearing a mask for 12 hours, 10 or 12 hours a day is pretty uncomfortable. They're not the greatest thing, but it was our last level. We had a lot of things in place to manage that dust, but we still relied on that final mask to do a lot of the work for us. And regularly people say, you know, we need to wear our masks, we need to comply with our system. And I think there's an error in that, because we weren't not really looking for compliance in the system. We're actually looking at stopping people getting silicosis. So even the way we use that language around things like that, we don't want to comply. We do want to comply with the system, but the main aim is to stop ourselves getting silicosis or getting any injury for that matter. So our language is pretty important. And I don't think anyone defines it better than David Marquette. He's a pretty interesting guy as well. So his definition is there: commitment comes from within, whereas compliance is first from an external source. Commitment is more powerful because it is an intrinsic motivator. Commitment invites full participation, engagement, and discretionary effort, where compliance invites doing just enough to get by, get through, or get it done. So again, I'd recommend any of David Marquette. He's written 2 books. Leadership is Language, the one there is his second one. His first one's called Turn the Ship Around, and we've got a bit of time within the hour, so I'll touch on his story. He was a captain of a Navy submarine. And before he got put in charge, he was told he was going to the submarine. We'll call it A. I can't remember exactly what its name was. So he knew that about 12 months out, and he studied that submarine inside and out and knew every little nut, bolt and screw in regards to it. And then, unfortunately, about 2 weeks before he was due to start on the ship, he actually got told he was going to another one called the Santa Fe. And the Santa Fe was the worst performing submarine. I think it was actually the worst performing ship in the US Navy. So they're regularly audited and stuff like that, as safety audits itself regularly. And he was put in charge of the worst performing ship. And he went into it with an open mind, full of curiosity, and he probably had an epiphany moment. A week out before they were going to do their first audit, they went out on an exercise, and as part of that exercise, he wanted to put the crew under a bit of pressure to see how they would react. And he asked his second in command to issue an order, which he did. And then that second command told the poor little helmsman, I think his title was, that he needed to put the ship into 2/3 speed. And David Marquette said he looked at the bloke and he did nothing, and he just started shaking. And then he asked him why he didn't put it into 2/3, and the ship didn't have it. So every other submarine that David Marquette had been on had a 2/3 speed, and this one didn't. So then he asked his second in command, did you know? And the second in command said, yes, I did know that it didn't have it. And then he goes, well, why'd you issue the order? And he said, because you told me to. And he looked at that and thought about it and went, okay, what if I'm wrong? What happens then? So he changed the whole way that he managed it. And the biggest change that he made was that he said that he was going to stop giving orders, and he calls it intent-based leadership, where they take away all top-down monitoring, and it comes from the bottom up. And they had some pretty incredible results. Within 12 months, they were the best performing ship, and within 2 years, they had the best result of any ship that had ever been tested in the US Navy. So if we change the environment that we're working in, the results can come pretty quickly when it's done right. So this is just a little picture here of in relation to coaching. And again, I'll relate it back to environment and the communication and consultation part. So this is, Michael Gervais spoke about this in one of his podcasts, and he's a sports psychologist, works with some pretty cool teams, works with the Seattle Seahawks NFL team, as well as the Red Bull team and everyone on that Red Bull team. So pretty high performing guys that do some pretty freakish stuff. And he said there's four levels of coaching. And as you can see there, the bottom one's amateur, then above that's performance, then there's high performance, and then elite. And he said that the picture actually should look more like that. And he said, again, there's one very clear difference between those bottom two and the top two. Yet there's a vast difference in their performance. And he said the main difference was that in those bottom two, that the coach does all the talking, and in the top two, the coach does all the listening. So the higher performing teams, as they get to the top, it all comes from the bottom through to the coaches. They listen and they create an environment, and it's visible to me here in Australia. And I don't know if the people online are East Coast or West Coast, but and it breaks my heart to say this, being from New South Wales, but Wayne Bennett appears to create that environment. He has some players that go to his teams that don't perform that great, but as soon as he gets them in his side, they turn into superstars. And that, to me, he creates that environment where those people certainly can flourish. Which leads me into the last question. What would you prefer your employees to do? Be obedient or take responsibility for what they do? Where are we? Sorry, 2 seconds. And again, we're sitting at 100% that we would want them to take responsibility. Yeah. Obedience is directly related to compliance, where they're doing what they're told. So again, we're focusing and doing things that is in direct opposition to where we really want to be and what we want to do. And with responsibility, it was one of the things that David Marquette spoke about, and he said it needs to sit at the correct level. So the people doing the tasks need to be the ones who have the power to make those decisions and actually take responsibility for what they're doing. And it goes hand in hand. We ask, whenever you ask who's responsible for safety, the pretty standard answer from that is everyone. But it does need that little disclaimer that there are different levels of responsibilities for different people for the same task. And in broad terms, I see that the organisation is responsible for creating the environment that the work's getting taken in, and that environment, it covers everything from providing, again, things related directly back to legislation, providing training, providing the correct equipment to do the task, and then the people doing it are actually responsible. So, very simple example, using a hammer, the organisation needs to provide the person with the hammer. They need to make sure they're trained in using it, and then if the person hits himself, if the person has all that they need and they hit himself with the hammer, they need to take responsibility for that. And I think with safety, we probably take responsibility and have it sitting in the wrong levels, and that's some of the reason why we sometimes get that wrong. And then I guess just again relating it back to that, back to the environment. In the 1950s, so 70 odd years ago, if there's any psychologists listening, there was a pretty well-known research done by a psychologist called Douglas McGregor. It was called Theory X and Theory Y. And that was about people's motivation in and around the workplace and different management styles. And one of his main findings, or one of the findings from that, was that given the right environment, people not only take responsibility, they seek it. So if we have people in the workforce who aren't taking responsibility for what they're doing, that could be directly related back to the environment that we've created for them. So it's definitely something that I think we need to think about and keep at the top of our minds, and why looking at the environment is so important over taking the easy option and looking at compliance and ticking boxes. So these here just are two of the better definitions that I've heard of responsibility. They come from two very different people from very different backgrounds. One's an Indian spiritual leader, and the other one was a Navy SEAL. And I took their meanings, although as you can see they're quite different. I understood them to mean the same thing. And with Sadhguru, with his responsibility simply means your ability to respond. If you decide I'm responsible, you'll have the ability to respond. If you decide I'm not responsible, you will not have the ability to respond. So me, I look at that, and if you're willing to bring something up and talk about it or complain about it, then there is a level of responsibility there for you in relation to that task or thing. And then with Jocko Willink, and this is a bit of a paraphrasing, it's taken from the book itself and podcasts that he's done, in that I'm responsible for everything that happens, and that gives me a level of control and the ability to fix it. And that's why I think they're closely related. That again, if he takes responsibility for it, he can control it and look at a better outcome. And responsibility is a very powerful thing if you look at it in that way. And if we can create that environment where people can take that responsibility, the changes we would see would be pretty dramatic, I think, going forward. I think I'm sort of coming to an end. I've probably ended a little bit quickly, but just some quick takeaways. I think, first of all, that there are definitely some challenges with what I've just spoken about. And I think the main thing is that they're very hard to measure. And I guess that's why it's probably not so much of a focus. All the other things with KPIs, inspections, we can easily take them down, record them, and we get a number at the end, and we show that that's how we're doing it. But these things with the environment, and commitment, trust, and responsibility, they're really hard to measure. And I completely understand that people want evidence-based research, but I don't think we should dismiss it just because it's really hard to measure. I also think that creating that right environment allows people to hold themselves to a higher standard, and in that definition from David Marquette about commitment being intrinsic, and when people have that intrinsic motivation, then that's when the results really come. So just because it's hard to measure, I don't think we shouldn't try and create it. So with the takeaways, create an environment with high levels of trust, seek commitment, not compliance, and we should make the system simple and flexible. And that sort of relates to the responsibility in that the people doing the task need the ability to change things in the moment when they're doing it, without all the levels above and going through that bureaucracy. If they can see a simple fix, they should be able to do it on the spot and get the job done. So yeah, probably come up a little bit short, but thank you very much. Hopefully Sarah has some questions for me from everyone. I'm more than happy to answer, but thanks for listening, and I hope you took a little bit away from it.
Thank you, Adam. That's the second time that book has been mentioned in the last few weeks. So I'll just drop, there aren't any questions right now, but maybe in a minute. I just want to drop in the chat a little bit of a link to the webinar next week. And while I wait, see if there's any questions. There you go. So we don't have any questions, so we'll probably leave it.
It's gone very easy on me.
That means you did a really good job, Adam.
I hope so.
David said, thanks, Adam, great presentation. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'll see you next week, and thank you so much, Adam, for doing that. It was nice to meet you at the conference.
No worries. Thank you very much, Sarah. Appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.